Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us again today for the third CyberCX Cyber Dialogue webinar. My name is Shannon Lane and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at CyberCX. I'll be your moderator for today. The purpose of these webinars remains consistent as we seek to assist you to maintain an effective cybersecurity posture during the COVID-19 crisis. Our aim is to provide you with actionable advice and to let you really drive the agenda of what we cover. So far, we have answered your questions on secure remote working, the altered threat landscape, and today we'll be looking at effective phishing prevention. We are now also starting to look beyond the crisis and to outline how we transition back to business as usual, whatever that new usual looks like. Next week, the Cyber Dialogue series will investigate the role of cyber leadership during and beyond the current crisis. A little more on that later on. Today, again, we have almost 200 registrants for this particular webinar, and thank you for sending through yet more truly outstanding questions. The changes that COVID-19 has wrought continues to surprise. Seeing a client on a Zoom call in their pajamas this week was a first for me, and at CyberCX, we recognise that for many, the changes to society have already occurred. It turns out that we can function without celebrities, without star footballers, rock concerts, and sporting events. But we can't function without other nurses, doctors, care workers, delivery drivers, and supermarket shelf stackers. We also can't function without great neighbours and the personal contacts that binds us together as an industry and as a society. Those interpersonal connections are an important and challenging dimension to maintain during social distancing. However, on balance, I think that the cybersecurity community has coped surprisingly well with the disruption caused by COVID-19. New challenges have certainly emerged, new threats have surfaced, and the security and resilience of our systems, operations, and people upon which livelihoods depend have all been stretched. I personally have noticed the change in how I work. I no longer have to commute and have slightly longer work days. I tend to jump from web conference to web conference and fit emails in between meetings. And this creates a lot more time pressure, which logically implies that I may not review each and every email received with the due diligence that it deserves. This makes today's topic on phishing prevention particularly relevant, and I'd like to now jump to the agenda. Today, we will again be running a question and answer format with advice to help you to understand what constitutes effective phishing prevention and how to achieve this. We'll also ask our two guests the very questions that you've sent through to us. We'll again run two polls during the webinar and share the results of those at the end. And we'll finish by opening the session to answer the questions that you submit online whilst you've been listening. Please use the chat facility to lodge any questions that you have as we go along. Today, we again have two outstanding guests, Alastair MacGibbon and Damian Grace. Before joining CyberCX as the Chief Strategy Officer, Alastair was the National Cybersecurity Advisor and Head of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre within the Australian Signals Directorate. He was Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on cybersecurity and has served as Australia's first e-safety Commissioner. Alastair also established the Australian Federal Police's High-Tech Crime Centre during his long service with the AFP, and previously worked at eBay as its Senior Director of Trust, Safety and Customer Support. He has also been the local CEO of Information Security Certification Not-for-Profit, Crest Australia. Damian is the Creator and General Manager of Friendly Phishing. Damian previously led the ethical hacking team at Shearwater, a CyberCX company, where he saw the impact of phishing on organisations and individuals. The Friendly Phishing training ecosystem that he created currently provides training for over 250,000 users across Australia and New Zealand. Thank you both for joining us today. We might start off with a very first question and direct this to Alastair. Alastair, thanks for joining. And this is a question that was a hangover from last week, so can we have your opinion on staff cyber awareness and current threats? How much awareness information is required, and which methods of distribution do you believe are the most effective?
Well, thanks, Shannon, and good morning to everyone. I apologise, by the way, if the connection here from my end, and feel free to talk over me if that's the case. Look, it's a great question. I think that we've probably not got our messaging right in relation to cybersecurity generally. I say that as a failed cybersecurity educator, in pretty much all of the 2000s. So I'm blaming myself as much as anyone else. I think a lot of this has to do with getting the right message to the right person at the right time, Shannon. And you know, like when I buy an electronic item, the last thing I ever read is the instruction manual, which usually is sitting in my recycling bin. And when I actually try to turn the thing on and I find it doesn't work, first time I dig through the bin to find my instructions. It's the same with cybersecurity. There's no point talking about cybersecurity at a time when it doesn't matter to the individual. So I think it's small doses, trying to convince all members of an organisation that they have a role to play in both physical and online security is important. It's a bit like saying, don't let anyone tailgate behind you going into your building. Make sure that you understand that you are part of the threat surface that an offender will try to abuse to achieve their objectives. So the more I can be secure, the more secure my organisation is. And I've got a vested interest in the security of my organisation because it feeds my family. So I'm not sure what the best means of communicating are, and Damian might be best to help answer that because I know he studied it really carefully. But I do think it's regular, it's information, it's got to be small snippets, and it needs to be relevant to the person at the time.
Okay, no, great answer. Damian, I think you might still be on mute. Do you have some insights into that particular, you know, what you think are the most effective methods for distribution of messaging and the best way to raise awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, from my point of view, there's no best way. How you deliver the training really depends on the individual. It depends on the organisation. It could be something as simple as the culture within the organisation, which can make a dramatic effect and a dramatic difference to how training is absorbed. But then also there's a cost component to it as well. You've got something like CBT or computer-based training, which is a low cost per user. You can get the message out there. You can start to change that awareness platform. Or you've got something like a face-to-face session, which is a much higher cost per individual, but you could potentially get stronger results because you can put more individualized style, you know, effort into that training. You know, people can ask the questions, they can specifically get help on the things that they need help with most. So it comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? You know, are you just trying to get the awareness up? Are you trying to, is it the first stage in your program where you're trying to get that information across to people and change their understanding? And actually, one of the big things, not only culture, but context. If you don't give people the reason to care, if you don't give them a reason to buy into it, then it's never going to actually work at all. So to me, there's no clear cut, here's a single answer. There is multiple options depending on what you're trying to achieve and depending on your organization.
Okay, that's very good. So culture and context are all important, and I guess possibly measurement as well in terms of how you judge and measure success. Very good. Last night we also saw from ACSC representatives on the television, and they were talking specifically about phishing and how to navigate the challenges that present themselves in market. We've got a great question. Next question: what are the common phishing methods currently used by malevolent attackers, and especially given the current COVID-19 focused attacks? What have you seen there?
Yeah. Look, I think if we're looking at COVID-19 specifically, what we're seeing is that there's no change necessarily in terms of the tactics. We're seeing a huge increase in COVID-19 style attacks. Some of the reports out there are saying that the attacks have more than doubled. We're seeing something like ransomware, for example, that jumped up 148% from March. You know, so ransomware was already a huge attack vector, and then all of a sudden it's jumping by 148%. That shows you the focus and the effort that people are putting into this, that the bad guys are putting into this type of attack. But when you look at the overall situation where we've got people working from home, we've got the security teams where they're having a really hard time trying to protect this data. You know, it's dispersed across so many different locations. Not everyone is actually working on a corporate device anymore. So they have to protect this data in so many sort of disparate and dispersed locations. It becomes a very hard thing to do. And then when you couple that with, you know, everyone now is in this different state of psychology. You know, they're scared, they're frightened. It's a different. I mean, they're actually more likely to click on these sort of things. And so it's really important there to understand that it's not so much the tactics have changed. We've still got credential-based phishing. We're still seeing malicious URLs and attachments. The BEC, all of those, they're still absolutely in play, but it's the psychology of these attacks that have really changed. What we're actually seeing is a lot of fake news. Things, learn this about COVID-19 or company bulletins or updates from airlines or from the World Health Organization or things like this that make people want to click because they're in that different state, that's different psychological state. And we're also seeing a lot of landing pages, fake landing pages, trying to steal credentials, that sort of thing on the back of it. So again, it's not so much that the tactics have changed, it's more the focus on where they're trying to deliver these attacks or how they're trying to get action on these different attacks.
Okay, that's
Shannon,
great, really.
Shannon, I like to make your job as moderator a bit harder, and if there's any legacy that comes from this, it's to throw you off if I could. And I've secretly to Damian, feel free to cut me off and talk over the top any time. So I thought I'd give it a throw, if I may. As you can always mute me, I'm sure. One of the things I used to say to the politicians when I had the joy of working with them is that I'd never let a good cyber crisis go to waste. If you want to drive changes, you take advantage of it. And in my discussions with senior public servants during this time, they're certainly trying to take advantage of driving some significant change in the way we help our defence posture. Equally, criminals, whether they're nation states or garden-owned criminals, never let a good crisis go to waste either, which is really what Damian was saying. I think they've morphed their attacks, their phishing efforts around COVID examples, and we've talked about this over the last several weeks. There was a really interesting article on the ABC this morning, and it's worth people looking up. It shows a screenshot of 2 SMS phishing. One was a legitimate government communication and one was the phishing communication, and it said try to guess which one is real. And it's kind of the type of thing that Damian and his team do with friendly phishing. I really recommend people going to the Australian Cyber Security Centre, cyber.gov.au. I've got to plug the old shop, because they've been putting up some really good examples of some of the phishing incidents they've seen. And I'll give them credit because people are often critical of government, how they lack agility. The ACSC is putting out some really good stuff on the examples that they're seeing, and they're going out after some of those sites. And I think we'll talk about how action can be taken later. But I just wanted to plug cyber.gov.au, have a look at the ABC article that was in today, and today's the 22nd of April if people are listening to this at some future date, which has 2 really good screenshots of how the government's communicating by SMS. Because remember, governments are changing the way as are all businesses, changing the way they're communicating with their customer base, and criminals will follow suit. Anyway, I just thought I'd do the first throw of you in terms of your order. And
no, look, Alastair, that's great. That's really great insight. And I think that the key theme there is, whilst the tactics remain the same, the themes and the psychology that they're leveraging through COVID-19 are the things that are compelling for users. So, and for people clicking, it really is a great segue to our next question though, which is, why does anti-phishing education not translate to change? And I think you've talked about the difficulty of actually assessing the difference between a legitimate and obviously a malevolent communication. How do we go about changing people's behaviour, given that it's a difficult thing and that the changes are very hard to achieve?
Well, firstly, I'm going to dispute the basis of the question, if I could. Rare day for me to be a bit controversial, so I'll give it a crack today. Look, I'm completely vexed on this issue, and anyone that's ever heard me speak publicly knows this. On the one hand, education is vital, right? It's just one of those things, and at the same time, we know education is incremental in terms of how you turn the ship, and both positions are valid. We must educate. It goes without saying. We're a first world country when you strip it back because of education, and we'll be a first world country when it comes to how we respond to cybersecurity matters through education as much as technology. I mean, we all know that it's not just technology, it's people as well in cybersecurity. In fact, I'll go out even further and say cybersecurity is a social problem, not a technical one. And for too long, we've allowed technical people to own the discussion and not let it be a much broader societal question. And education falls very squarely on that sort of soft skills social side, but it's vital. Having said that, we know that it is only incremental in its effect, but it doesn't mean you don't do it. How many negatives have I got there? What it means is you've got to keep doing it. I'll say that I stand up in speeches and put my hand up and say, if we're, the first recognition of failure is, first way to change failure is to recognize you failed. And I always say that I've failed in education, but I believe in it. Now, I know Damian will have a different view because he actually runs an effective education product about phishing, but Damian won't say to you, I'm sure, unless he wants to correct me, that it doesn't change everyone's behaviour, but it's important to do.
100%. Okay. I totally agree with that. It's not about changing everyone's behaviour, it's about reducing your risk. And I totally agree with what you said before about technical people have owned the discussion for too long. And when you see the way that this is typically approached and the way that it's technical people are usually highly logical people, and they approach this from a logical standpoint. But the problem is that most people aren't necessarily logical, they're emotional beings. And the way that you have to deal with an emotional being is substantially different. So I totally agree that you're not going to be able to change everyone, but you can make incremental changes over time to sort of get to an outcome that is viable for everyone.
In fact, Damian, as we riff off each other a bit more, I've been talking to boards in Australia and overseas now for nigh on, coming up to probably 20 years when it comes to this type of subject. And I've noticed a dramatic shift in the types of questions I get from directors and the C-suite, particularly in Australia. And part of that's because of education, because you're scared to ask a question if you don't know anything about a subject. And for a long time, we let cybersecurity, whether it's phishing or other bits, to be kept with the technocrats in an organisation, and boards abrogated their responsibility. That shifted a bit with ASIC and others, forcing liability onto directors, which is a good thing. But what it has also seen is directors have been educated, and a little bit of education goes a long way in contributing to a discussion. So if I know a little bit more about phishing, then I can have a conversation with technical and with other people about what are our solutions? How are we trying to stop this thing? Isn't there a smarter way as a society to address it? Whereas if I don't know anything about phishing, for example, I'm not going to engage in a social or policy context. And that's what's been missing in cybersecurity. So I'm convincing myself more and more in this answer that education, even if it seems like from time to time as an organisation to be a long haul, is a vital haul in order for us to address this what I'd still say is the biggest existential threat to businesses in the long term. Thanks, Shannon. I'm going to shut up.
No, that's good, because you're also touching on another point there that I think is important. Is it's not just education to the users. It's education to the board, to the management. We saw, and I'm interested to know, Alastair, we saw a dramatic shift in the way that boards were approaching this when ransomware really started to hit the scene. It created a huge wave. It was the talk of every conference, every event you went to, and we saw that that's when people started to take phishing seriously. Is that kind of around about the same time you noticed that this was that they started to change their focus and their attention?
Yeah, I think they're, look, so the first thing is things have to be relevant to a person for them to pay attention to it, right? Or else it's an esoteric, nice to think about, but hey, it doesn't relate to me. So you're right, ransomware has spread like a rash. The other thing is business email compromise, right? And we know that the starting point for each of those very pernicious, extraordinarily wide and largely non-directed types of attacks start with email and therefore phishing. So you're right, for a long time, I remember talking to my first parliamentary committee to do with phishing, our first phishing email that we saw when we ran the High Tech Crime Centre, and Nick Klein actually who was on last week, helped us build an animation to explain to politicians what phishing was. I don't think they understood it at that stage, and that's not denigrating the political class. The reason why they didn't understand it is it didn't relate to them. But now if you talk to a politician or a business leader, you're right, Damian, they've heard of ransomware, they've heard of a hospital being locked up, they've heard of a business having to shut its doors because it could no longer send invoices or access customer records. And if it's relevant to you, the education clearly becomes more important. So you're right. And the thing about boards is it's all about risk. And therefore, when you start understanding that those risks pertain to you, and phishing is an exceptional threat vector, then hey, I need education on it. But Shannon, here's my commitment to you as the moderator. I'm going to shut up now.
Look, Alastair and Damian, I think they're great insights, and I guess, you know, again, really good to preload the next question, which is we're teaching people not to click on links or download attachments received through email, but people keep doing this, and can we really fix the problem? I think you've nicely captured, you know, the education element, the incremental improvement, the focus that needs to be directed to it from boards and management, and to really sort of address the social dimension and manage risk. Can you sort of expand on that any further?
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest problems that we've got when we're looking at this is we, and I'm not sure why this is, but we keep on looking at it as a binary thing. You know, they're either people are fixed or they're not, and it's not a binary problem. We've got, you know, if you look at all the technical controls that you put in place, you know inherently that your mail filter is not going to stop everything. You know, does that mean you don't use it? No, it absolutely reduces risk. What about your AV? Well, AV is also not going to stop everything. We know as part of the ethical hacking area that we can bypass AV sort of any day that we want, but it doesn't, you know, what it does is it weeds out that low-hanging fruit. You know, it reduces your risk vector. And so what we look at is that training is just another one of those tools. It's another way of reducing that risk. So all good security infrastructure, and this includes people, should be layered. You know, the element is just part of that layer. There's no way you're ever going to fix it, and we don't promote this as a silver bullet, but you need to have that layering, you need to have improvement, you need to have monitoring, you need to have reporting. Reporting is actually a huge one from a human standpoint. If you can have people in a situation where they're comfortable enough to actually report phishing emails, where they feel like there's going to be no repercussion, then that also allows you to improve your response times to things like incident response. So again, so now it's not just are we ever going to get people to stop clicking on it? It's how can we turn them into part of the solution rather than part of the problem? Yeah, they're probably going to start, they're still going to click on things, but how do you get them then to go, put their hand up and say, hey, hang on, I just did something bad. I need you to look at this really quickly, because that can make a dramatic difference to the loss to your organization and the impact that it has on your organization. So we look at it as an ecosystem. You know, this whole ecosystem and really our jobs in a lot of ways is how can we look at all of the different layers, how can we protect each one of these layers, and how do we make sure that it facilitates the business growth and the business functionality at the same time.
I really like your answer there, Damian. I know it's not a mutual love-in session, though I do love you. I mean, essentially, this is cyber risk resilience management, right? Not cyber security. It's not binary, as you said. I think that was the best part of your answer. It's not, you know, am I secure or not secure? Because if you had to choose between the two, the answer is you're not. And that's a really depressing answer. So the question should be, how secure and insecure am I? What's my posture? What's my resilience? How prepared am I? And as you said, part of this is about stopping people from clicking on links and attachments. In a numbers game, and Shannon, given my ability to answer the next question, and I'm scared of saying anything, but I'm going to say part of this is the defender's dilemma, right? I mean, we can teach people to be right 99 times out of 100. The attacker only needs to succeed once. But then it comes to the point you were just making, which is, hey, I think I've just done the wrong thing. I've just clicked on a link, and giving them an empowerment and a permission to phone the IT folks and say, I think I've just done something, which relates to phishing. Could you have a look at my laptop and my inbox, because I think I've done something wrong, because it's speed to response matters. So we constantly talk about this concept: design out risks where you can, right? That's the best thing you can do as an organization. Constantly monitor, educate your staff, and constantly monitor your systems through a security operations center or something, and then be really quick to respond, because it's the quick response and the monitoring that's going to reduce the harm to an organization to get you back up and running again. We don't want everyone to be so bulletproof that they don't open an email, because we still communicate with that, and we don't want them not to respond to SMSs, because we know we communicate with each other via those and other means. But what we need to do is have people being cognizant of the threat environment and what their role is in it, and then we start to win. Then we start pushing cost into the offender, and because it's not about stopping offenders, it's just about making it harder for them, more costly for them, more time consuming, so that they move on to another target, preferably in another country, and we can go about our business of doing business.
Very good. Look, thanks, gentlemen. I think that's the great insight there, and certainly, I think the non-binary element of that answer was great. We might just pop to a quick poll now, and the first poll of today is how often do you test your phishing resilience? Do you regularly do it? Do you do it on a monthly basis and track improvement? Do you sometimes do it? Is it an annual or potentially a biannual event? Ad hoc? Does it happen once or potentially minimally? Or is it an answer where you just don't know? We'll probably give you 30 seconds to answer that. If you do have questions that you'd like raised that you'd like us to answer, please keep them coming through via the chat facility, and we'll be able to deal with those at the conclusion of the formal part of the Q&A session.
We do need some type of hold music, I reckon, Shannon, for next week.
Yeah, look, I know you mentioned it last week, Alastair, and I still haven't got my act together, but I'll do my best for next week. How's that?
Doing for the week, frankly. I mean, seriously, I hope we're not distracting people from clicking on a button. But some type of hold music or me singing for you.
Yeah, I think we'll go with the hold music. Thanks very much.
Yeah, definitely the hold music.
You've heard me sing before, have you?
Just by your reputation precedes you, mate. But yeah, we'll look at that hold music for next week.
Okay.
All right. Look, but thanks for the offer. Look, we'll move on. The next question is, we're teaching. Hang on, we've just had that one. We're gonna move forward. Yep. Can you walk through what a good phishing awareness program looks like? And maybe we'll throw to you to start with, Damian, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Look, I think firstly, to understand what a good program looks like, you need to understand what it doesn't look good, what bad looks like. And the reason that we actually created our program in the first place is because we saw that the way that this is typically done is not necessarily effective. This kind of goes back to what Alastair was saying before about technical people owning the problem. The common way of approaching this is, I'm just going to send out a really hard phishing email to people and trick them, and then I'm going to go, well, look, my users can't, get this, that they're always going to fail, so I'm just going to do it again and prove myself right, and then I'm going to do it again. And what this does is it just gets people annoyed. Nobody likes to be tricked. You're setting them up for failure. Most people in most organizations are non-technical, and to get a non-technical person to the point of understanding a technical phishing email, it's a huge challenge. That's a journey. It's simple for us, probably everyone on this call would probably find this simple, but for most people, it's incredibly hard. And not only that, a lot of these people have a fear reaction to doing technical training. These people are quite often have zero interest in technology, and they get scared when they get technical training put in front of them because they don't know how it's going to make them feel. And so really it's around finding a way that can actually build people up, that understands where they are now, understands where you need to be, and builds them up using a framework or a number of frameworks that are proven to work. And so, really what it comes down to, firstly, is also understanding that there is two distinct areas within the business that you need to be focusing this on. And when I say distinct areas, I'm not talking about, focusing it on the execs versus HR or IT or anything like that. What I'm talking about is you have the stakeholders, the people that are wanting to make change, and then you've got everybody else, the people that you want to create change on, essentially, or with. And so the stakeholders, the way that you can work for them is usually through a baseline, through a risk assessment, which is pretty much exactly what I was just talking about, sending out hard phishing emails, trying to understand what the risk is. But it's very important to do it in a way that doesn't get users put out. You don't want users to get upset or to get angry or feel tricked or anything like this. So there's sort of things that you can do, such as anonymization and redirection, and things that you can do to keep people on side at that point. But then after that, you need to move on to everyone. How do you create that change within the environment, that cultural change, which is ultimately what you're trying to achieve? And to create that cultural change, you need to use phishing emails, 100%. But they need to be fundamentally different to how you do your baseline. These emails that are designed to create change are no longer out to trick people, they are out to help people. And the way that you help people is to start with baby steps. I like to look at it as like an algorithm, math algorithm. If I'm going to teach someone advanced math, I'm not going to go, here's the hardest math algorithm I've got, solve this. Oh, you didn't solve it? Well, here's another one. You still didn't solve it? Well, here's another one. We know intuitively that that's not going to work, but this is the way that we approach phishing. So what we want to do is start off with the 1+1s, the 2+2s. We want to build them up, grow them up, give them confidence, and then that's how you make that change. And then from an actual education standpoint, from a training standpoint, you need to also use frameworks. You can't, what we typically see is, here's 5 minutes of video, now you're an expert. Most of the time you can't get anything that you need across in 5 minutes. It's typically a don't do this, don't do that kind of training. And it doesn't give people enough context, doesn't give them that WIFM factor, what's in it for me. And so if they don't know what's in it for them, then they never grasp onto to what you're trying to achieve. And so you need to start off with training that gives them that understanding of why it's important to them, grow them up over time. Ideally, the methodology we follow is what's known as KSA, which stands for knowledge, skills, and ability. It's a way of building people up gradually over time. And then when you couple that with those ongoing phishing campaigns and you gradually give them that growth path, that individual journey, that's when you can start to see fundamental change over time. And then also, it's really important to have a very strong communication plan. How are your execs? How is your CEO? How is how are your leaders embracing this? How are they communicating this out to the organization? What are you putting around the organization? Not that this really matters at this point in time, but to get people engaged. There's a whole raft of different things you can do, a whole raft of little techniques and tips and ways of making this take hold. But that's at a high level, kind of what we think it takes to create that really good phishing awareness program.
Very good, thank you, Damian. Look, we might pop on to the next question. This one for Alastair. Should businesses increase their restrictions on internet social networks during this time or relax them to help staff cope? Are they more or less of a threat from a phishing perspective?
Do you put these questions in each week as a way of me continuing my losing rant against BYOD, Shannon? Just out of interest, is there a? Not
I, Alastair, not I, but certainly our listeners and the people asking the questions have an interest in hearing you talk about that particular issue yet again.
One day I'm going to win on my anti-BYOD stance. Maybe it's another life, I don't know. It all started collapsing when the iPhone and the iPad came in, and all the directors of companies liked getting their board papers on iPads, and you had IT departments pushing back saying, no, no, no. And then they won, and then everyone said, if they've got one, why can't I? And then the world changed. So short answer is, it's going to depend where you're working. If you're working in a security environment in government or in an institution where you need to have tighter security controls, you're not going to have these social media applications on a device that's managed by your organization. They're just going to disable it. So the concept of whitelisting is a really important control, and we know that. We know the Australian Signals Directorate through the Australian Cybersecurity Centre will say whitelisting is important, and that's saying what applications you want and software you want to run on devices. I think in organizations these days, if I could access my corporate email or conduct other activities via my mobile phone, then there should be some form of mobile device management pushed onto my phone as part of that agreement. And that does mean, by the way, that the organization has control over certain aspects of my device, and that's the trade-off. If I don't want that, then then the corporation should either give me a separate device for the purposes of conducting business, or I should, if it's a corporate supplied device and I don't want the restrictions on it, I should go and get myself a device. And the best practice would say that we should create an air gap between one device that I do my personal life on and one device I do my public or work life on. Now, we know the reality is that increasingly, well, not just increasingly, they've just completely blurred. So to answer the question about whether or not, so there's my BYOD ramble for anyone that wants to keep count. I think social media is an interesting one in terms of whether or not it's a bigger threat vector. I'm going to say that as it becomes, you know, we all have a multitude of ways we can message each other now. And I suspect on some of the apps where I think I'm only communicating with people I know, I'm going to be more trusting in that network than I would through an email. And attackers will use that trust and leverage it against us. And so that means that, yeah, it could well be more of a threat vector because of the trust element. And it might also be more problematic based on how those apps burrow through corporate protections. So if it's encrypted end to end, then there's less chance to open and inspect, and that makes it a problem. The last thing I'd say, and Damian mentioned it, I think, in an earlier answer, there's the misinformation aspect that comes from social networks, and the concept of, you know, and the terms become a little bit problematic, but the fake news bit, you know, what do you trust and what don't you trust, which the social networks clearly are part of the problem of. Short answer is corporates and governments need to push controls out to devices that access their networks, or they need to reduce the ability for those devices to do potentially dangerous things inside your network if you allow them to have access. Long answer, not sure if I've answered the question.
No, I think that's great, Alastair. Maybe, Damian, if I can briefly sort of flip to you. Do you seeing social media used as a bit of an attack vector through, you know, to try and encourage people to click on links, or what are you seeing in the wild at the moment?
We're seeing a couple of things. One, when I mentioned before about fake landing pages, we can see that a lot of those, not a lot, but some of those can be, you know, Facebook style pages, etc. One of the, just sort of touching on what Alastair said before, in terms of mobile devices, we're actually just across the board seeing an uptick in people using mobile devices, clicking on, you know, this, obviously we can see this through our friendly phishing product, people clicking on devices, mobile devices and things like that. So there's definitely a trend moving towards mobile devices. In terms of social, there's definitely different types of attack vectors from there, and I would suggest that they're increasing, but it's restricting people from there. I think that's tough. You know, there is just as much risk from email as what there is from social, in my view. So I think you need to manage them in a similar way.
Okay, no, very good, thank you. We might, in the interest of time, press on. Given the current pandemic crisis, can we really expect users to maintain alertness to phishing threats? And I think that sort of touches on, you know, the changes to how we work. Damian, if I can get your insights on that, please.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, like, it's definitely unprecedented times. We've not seen anything like this, and what comes with that, though, and I kind of touched on it earlier, that people are scared. They're confused, they feel in the dark, they don't really know what's going on, they're looking for information. Most of the headlines are you know, in the news are around COVID-19. And touching on what Alastair said before, you know, this is what the bad guys prey on, is this fear and uncertainty makes people do irrational things. They do things that they wouldn't necessarily do. And so, no, we can't expect them to maintain their alertness to phishing emails at the moment, but we can certainly help them maintain that alertness. And so, you know, what that means is, you know, don't necessarily put them through a fully, you know, hour-long training course on this sort of thing, but let's start sending out snippets. Let's send out, you know, some posters or some just email alerts, or we've started releasing our family version of friendly phishing, just so people can get that out, and it's just a short video that people can do, you know. So just getting it front of mind helps them to keep it, front of mind. So you just need to put it there for them. Essentially, it's not something they're going to focus on specifically.
Okay, very good. All right, look, again, there's some really good themes here, I think, in terms of continuing to incrementally improve and provide information that's front of mind to people. So there's some good insight there. We might pop onto our second poll now, and that poll is: what best describes the impact of phishing-related scams on your organisation? Has it been a high impact, and have you experienced material loss in the past year? This could be through direct financial manipulation of invoicing or similar, could be downtime, could be incident response fees. Have you had low impact, so limited impact with a quick recovery, which again, hopefully is the case, or is it just something you're just not aware of and phishing impacts aren't something that's visible to you? We will also probably take this opportunity to take a poll as to what sort of music you want during the poll for next week, assuming no elevator music. And I'm fairly confident we won't need Alastair to sing, but we'll
I
take
like the concept, Shannon. Like, you could put a couple of choices up for people. I've got some eclectic music taste I'm happily suggest to you, but it's a good idea.
All right.
What should we?
Yeah, insights there to be great. All right, thank you, and thanks for filling in the poll questions. I think yep. Okay, so next question. Scam detected, then what? The takedown process takes too long. Comments on that, Alastair?
Oh, look, it's another hot button for me, Shannon. It's like you're trying to pick every hot button there is. I'm going to say, yeah, look, absolutely. What we've failed to do as a country, and no country really does this well, so it's not just Australia, is to look at this sort of as an ecosystem and what role we each play. So let's say there's a phishing website set up, a campaign run, goes into various people's inboxes, people click on it, gets detected at some point. Who gets notified? Well, these days you'd notify, in the old days you would have notified the computer emergency response team. That's now part of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. You'd notify them. They will make best efforts working with computer emergency response teams around the world to work with ISPs and telcos to take down offending sites, and that can be hit and miss. All right, I mean, it literally comes down to an ISP, it comes down to a telco and how cooperative they are. It's not good enough. I know the ACSC, in fact, looking at their website, the Australian government gave offensive cybersecurity powers to the Australian Signals Directorate to take action against criminals offshore, and I think that's a good thing. And the ACSC says it's disrupted some sites that have been used for phishing, particularly COVID related, and that's a good thing. But again, I'm going to say that's really hard to scale. It is difficult. The Telecommunications Act allows for a police officer to direct a telecommunications company to not allow access to a site. I used that authority back in Australian High-Tech Crime Centre days. It's certainly been used by other regulators since. It's fallen into a little bit of disrepair, and I'd say that's something that could and should be done more. So when it's a known bad site, enough people have reported it, that my ISP should prevent me going there, and it should be done under either the ISP's own motion that says we know this is a malicious site, and we're not going to allow our customers to be going to it. That's a good thing. Or it's at the direction of a regulator or law enforcement officer who says this is a known bad site, it's going to harm Australians, and we're using our law to prevent it. Now, some people might think that's heavy-handed. I've spent 30 years being on the more heavy-handed end of the scale, and I'll proudly say that. This is something that we need to debate publicly. Should we do more? Short answer is yes, we should be using the Signals Directorate's offensive capabilities where that works. We should be using our telecommunications companies and our ISPs. Police and regulators, whether it's the ACCC or others, need to be more active in this space to be protecting us, because the poor business or the poor consumer is powerless in this space. All they can do is report and hope is not a strategy. What we need as a nation is a strategy. Now, people might ask, hey, you've been in positions to influence this over the years. Yes, I have tried, and I'm ashamed to say that I've not yet achieved it. I'll say this to anyone that's listening. I am not going to retire before I eventually help solve this problem, because to me, it's a solvable issue. There is an ability for us as a first world nation, and there's an ability for other first world nations to take more action against online scammers. And it's a crying shame to me that there is far too much finger pointing saying it's someone else's problem. And I think we collectively in the cybersecurity industry, those of us on this call and those who are listening, need to get together to fix this. There are smart people who are willing to work. What needs to happen is for it to be corralled, for us to start to walk and then run. And we are never going to stop scammers. The question is, and I'll finish here, I do apologize, Shannon, for my ramble, is our job is not to stop people falling victim of scams. I mean, there have been scammers around since there's been 3 people in the world. But what I would say is we should not allow the level of victimization at such a low cost to the scammer. Our jobs should be, whether we're in government or the private sector, to drive up cost for the offender, and we have failed to do so, particularly in this space, and it's our job to do so. It's incumbent upon us. I'm not going to retire before I've helped solve that problem.
That's awesome. Look, I think that's a great call to action for all of us, really. I fairly inspirational call to action. So, look, we might drop into a little bit more of the rapid fire response now, because we are sort of getting towards the end of the session, and there have been some great questions come through that I'd like to get to. So, Damian, could we potentially have a fairly short, sharp answer to what are some of the technical solutions for scam email detection? Do they actually work? And which ones do you think work better?
Look, I've sort of touched on this a little bit before. I'm not going to point out sort of one product or a group of products, to be honest. I think that it's, as I mentioned before, an ecosystem. You need your email filtering, you need your antivirus. All of them are going to be, they all have their pros and cons. All of them work in some places, don't work in others. It's an evolution. You need to just continue to adapt and to build and to grow your environment and each of those layers in there. If there's one thing that I would say that you absolutely need right now is 2-factor authentication on any external device. That basically can wipe out a lot of the credential capture style attacks. If you wanted to take that further, you could use something like a YubiKey. If you look at the studies through Google, for example, where when they got hacked a number of years ago, it was through credential capture. They implemented YubiKeys, and now they're saying that they've had 0 credential-based hacks since. You know, so that's definitely one where you can make a tangible difference, and definitely something that I would be looking at putting in place.
All right, thank you. Moving on, how do we protect staff's mobile devices, most of which are not company assets, from SMS-based attacks? And I know, Alastair, you know, you've talked about MDM and BYOD challenges. Any other insights for that particular question?
No, in the interest of you moving on, I'm just going to say, you know, the organisation having some control over the device in terms of MDM and or restricting the types of information that a mobile device can hold, and the authorities it has within a network. So it's basically user access control and saying, well, MacGibbon can do this based on this corporate device if it's sitting inside the perimeter of my organisation, which hopefully will happen one day soon. But he has these privileges when he's outside, and if he's on a mobile device, then he has you know, less or more privileges depending on what it is. I think that's the smartest way to do it. There is no such thing, as we've said, as complete protection. It's about reducing the likelihood, and it's about being smart about it. Most staff are willing to trade off that concept of an MDM being on there for the ability to do free work for us outside hours by answering emails and the like. So, you know, it's, and I say that sarcastically, the reality is we've stretched our work life, right? But part of it is making sure that corporates have that ability to know how much harm can happen on the device.
All right, fantastic answer, thank you. Look, we have a whole heap of questions that I'll try and get through as quick as we can. This is a rapid fire section. Great question first up. How do you convince senior management phishing isn't entrapment? Maybe Damian.
Yeah, look, I think it actually comes down to how you do it, how you approach it. Like I mentioned earlier, the traditional method is you're literally trying to trick people. When you can show management and HR as well, HR is very important to get in because they care for the people. When you can show them that what you're trying to do and the way that you're doing it, using anonymization, using harmless redirects, this sort of thing, the way that you approach it and the way you build your messaging to those people, you can start to change those thought patterns. Showing people how it's actually going to help them rather than trick them. It's fundamental to the program you choose.
Okay, no, very good. Next question, I think, was a nice little segue, or actually you've possibly already answered it. Wouldn't multi-factor authentication effectively thwart phishing?
Some phishing, credential-based phishing, yeah, not all the time, depends on the method. If we're talking tokens, there's ways that you can enter a token onto a page along with your credentials, and it'll automatically log you in. Oh,
yep. I was going to say man the middle.
You go, Alastair.
No, sorry, Damian. I was trying to sound technical when you're the technical one. Sorry.
Yeah, so there is ways of bypassing that. When I talk about the YubiKeys that I was talking about before, that's a different method. That's very hard to get around, but that's only part of the problem. We're still talking about attachments which can exploit your machine, or links that can, we're seeing zip files that you can download and execute to run ransomware. There's other ways of doing it that the two-factor won't help at all.
Okay, very good. Question there, working from home has many disadvantages, such as others being present and trying to multitask. Probably more of a comment. Any observations from you, Alastair or Damian, about that?
Yes, heaps of multitasking, and I think that increases part of the sort of our threat landscape, right? Because we're trying to do more things and juggle things. The other issue is confidentiality of documents, of conversations, and security of devices with others around.
Okay, no, very good. Damian, in terms of the fact that you potentially got, I mean, we've all probably got, or a lot of us have got kids at home from school at the moment who are probably trying to share resources and certainly sucking up a lot of network bandwidth with Netflix, amongst other things.
Yes.
Any challenges there?
Yeah, look, I think there is. What it does give you, though, is a good opportunity to say, look, I didn't click on that link. It must have been my child. So, yeah, there is. Distraction is a big thing, not just from kids, but everything else that goes on. The mailman, the dog barking, all of that sort of thing. This can lead to more susceptibility, without a doubt. I can't really offer a solution, unfortunately, to that one.
No, fair enough. A couple that have come through, more comments, I'll take them as. Personally, nothing wrong with BYOD. Again, it's an education thing. What about if you have isolated networks? Will that impact your views on BYOD?
So networks, in the sense that you're only in one part of it, not the other. So you've created some form of
I think that's what they're getting at. Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. There's ways you can architect networks that reduce the threat of compromising one part versus another. There's no doubt. And look, I've lost the BYOD battle. I just like to fight it every once in a while. Well, every week. Yeah, no, the person's right. BYOD's got some advantages too, right? But it's got some disadvantages how you manage a fleet.
Okay, very good. Look, and a sort of a follow-up question from the one earlier around the advantages and disadvantages of working from home. Would it be suitable to advise staff to save documents that they're working on to an encrypted storage device, and then do some discovery around remote access? I'm not sure I follow that question. Remote access, and to cut the inactive timeout to a lesser period, given it normally defaults to 4 hours. I'm not sure. Might be a tougher one to answer. We might take that one offline and see if we can provide a bit more of a detailed response to that particular question. All right, guys, look, I think we're sort of probably getting up to near time. So any other insights, final insights you'd like to offer based on the conversation today?
Look, from my standpoint, thank you everyone for coming. It's really good to be able to talk to people that actually have an interest in this. And there is no one size fits all. Every organization, every culture, every environment is different. I recommend planning, working out how you can and map this, whatever you're trying to achieve, to your environment. How's it going to fit in with those technical controls, etc. Yeah, really, again, warm thank you for coming along.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that if I could, and just dwell on one last point, and that is, I agree with Damian on how is it that we should educate people. And this is not about tricking people. It's not about showing that you're smarter than your users. It's actually about helping them through this. That's the only way we're going to solve this problem. That's what I've always liked about Damian's product, is that it's about walking a person through it and helping educate them.
All right, fantastic. Look, thanks, Alastair and Damian. That's been fantastic today. Look, we hope all of you on the webinar have found this information that we've shared today helpful, and specifically helping you to understand effective phishing prevention. The important work that we continue to do in the cybersecurity industry is fundamental to a functioning economy, and certainly CyberCX is here to listen and to help. We have over 500 people, 500 cyber experts across the country to assist, and we're willing and able to help you move through this crisis and beyond in the future. If you do have any challenges, please circulate them, send them to us, and we'll do our best to answer them and formulate good and compelling webinars for you. I'd like to encourage you to also take a look at the 5 strategies we've produced to help organisations navigate the COVID crisis. I'd also like to remind you that next week we have another fantastic webinar. We'll be running this in collaboration with the Australian Information Security Association, ASA to most of you. The webinar will focus on cyber leadership through the crisis and beyond. And again, we'll feature Alastair MacGibbon, but we'll also feature Narelle Devine, who's the CISO at Services Australia. Many of you, like myself, will still know Services Australia as the Department of Human Services. So she's got some unique insights to offer there. We'll be talking about leadership across the board, but specifically in the cyber realm. So please join us for that one. If I can also encourage you to please help us with some Q&A around additional topics for webinars and how to make better webinars for you. We really want to make the most compelling and informative possible. And I'll just share with you very quickly the poll results so that we sort of round that out for today. So here we go. So how often do you test your phishing resilience? 27% of you say that you do that monthly and track improvements, which is great. 20% say sometimes, so it's an annual or biannual assessment, and 32% say it's minimal, so ad hoc and when you can get around to it, and 20% don't know. So interesting insights there. We might come back with some information around how to activate some more regular testing in that space. And the second poll is, okay, what best describes the impact of phishing-related scams on your organisation? High impact, only 9% have experienced a material loss in the past year. That's great. That's good to know. Or not for the 9%, but it's good to know that it's not more broadly experienced than that. Low impact, quickly recoverable. That's 74%, and 17% of you are not aware of phishing impacts at this stage. So again, some interesting insights there. As mentioned, everyone will receive a copy of the recording via email today, and we'll be posting links to this session on our website. Thanks again. Hope you found that valuable, and have a great day, and please join us again for the webinar next week. Thanks again.